Vaccines saved humanity. Without them, we'd all be dead. But what if I told you that's not the full story and you have been lied to? What if, long before the first shot went into anyone's arm, something else had already slashed deaths from infectious diseases by as much as 70, 80, even 90%? What if our great-grandparents had already fought and won most of the battle without the vaccines? But stay with me, because the twist is not what you think. Vaccines didn't save the world. The truth is more complicated, more shocking, and way more interesting. When people talk about infectious diseases, they usually focus on deaths, smallpox deaths, measles deaths, polio deaths. But here's the first bombshell. Most of those deaths had already fallen dramatically before vaccines ever showed up. How? Not through cutting-edge technology, not through miracle medical breakthroughs, but through something so boring it never gets headlines. Plumbing, sewage systems, clean drinking water, consistent food supply, hospitals that actually knew how to treat sick people. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, cities stopped dumping human waste into rivers people drank from. Farmers learned how to grow food more efficiently, giving families access to real nutrition, not just bread and potatoes. Doctors figured out supportive care, hydration, oxygen therapy, and eventually antibiotics. And the result? Measles mortality, down 90% before the vaccine. Whooping cough mortality, down 75% before widespread vaccination. Diphtheria mortality, down massively before the toxoid existed. Not because the diseases were disappearing, but because people were surviving them. This is the part everyone forgets. Mortality fell first, incidence did not. People were still getting these diseases. They were just less likely to die from them. Let's talk about polio, because this one gets thrown around constantly. You mentioned questioning anything vaccine-related? Instant reply. Glad you didn't get polio. But here's what almost no one knows. Polio deaths had already dropped by about 50% before the 1955 vaccine. That's true. Supportive care was improving. The iron lung, better hospital interventions, they all helped reduce the fatality rate. But here's the twist most viral posts leave out. Polio cases were exploding. While fewer people were dying, more people than ever were being paralyzed. The US hit its worst polio epidemic ever in 1952, right before the vaccine. 57,000 cases, thousands paralyzed, parents terrified to let their kids swim or even play outside. So yes, mortality fell before vaccines, but the disease itself was still out of control. Then the vaccine arrived, and something sanitation alone had never accomplished happened almost overnight. Polio cases crashed by over 90% within a few years. Not just deaths, actual cases. That is something clean water simply cannot explain. Sanitation helps waterborne illnesses. Polio spreads person to person, even in wealthy, clean countries. So what really happened with polio? Sanitation and care reduced deaths. The vaccine reduced actual infections and nearly eliminated the disease in the developed world. Both things can be true at once. Now let's talk about measles. You've probably heard quotes like, "Measles deaths dropped 95% before the vaccine." And that's actually true. By around 1950, the measles fatality rate had plummeted thanks to better nutrition, especially vitamin A, better hospital care, cleaner living conditions. But here's what's shocking. The number of people getting measles hadn't changed at all. Measles was still infecting almost every child, every few years, like clockwork. Millions of cases in the US every year. So what changed after the vaccine? The cases didn't just drop, they collapsed. From millions to thousands to hundreds to almost none. By 2000, the US declared measles eliminated. Not because of sanitation, not because of nutrition. Those things had been stable for decades. It happened because of the vaccine. Again, sanitation reduced deaths. Vaccines reduced cases. Two different victories, two different eras. The same pattern appears over and over. Whooping cough, pertussis, deaths down significantly before vaccines, but cases stayed sky high. After the vaccine, cases dropped dramatically. Diphtheria. Death rates declined before the toxoid, but outbreaks kept happening. After vaccination, diphtheria became almost non-existent. Sanitation builds the foundation. Vaccines finish the job. But the online arguments you see today, they usually take one half of the story and pretend it's the whole thing. So why do people think vaccines saved the world? Because in one very specific way, they kind of did. Not by reducing deaths, not by improving survival, but by doing the one thing sanitation could never do. Vaccines stopped the spread of the diseases themselves. Sanitation and nutrition made us healthier. Vaccines made us immune. Both sides of this story matter, but our culture tends to glorify the medical intervention and forget the simple public health victories that laid the groundwork. And that's the real tragedy. We lose appreciation for the boring things that saved millions of lives because they weren't profitable, glamorous, or dramatic. So here's the shocking truth. Vaccines didn't save the world, at least not alone. If you transported vaccines back to the year 1850, they wouldn't have saved anyone. People were drinking contaminated water, living in sewage-filled streets, starving, dying from infections they didn't even understand. No vaccine can overcome that. But by the time sanitation, nutrition, and modern medical care laid a foundation, then vaccines stepped in and wiped out the diseases themselves. It was a tag-team effort, a partnership, a story bigger than any single hero. Your great-grandparents conquered infectious disease with sewage pipes, clean water, hospitals, improved nutrition, antibiotics, and vaccines. Not one of those things alone saved humanity, but together, they changed history. If you want more videos digging into medical history, hit subscribe, drop a comment, and tell me which disease story you want next. Thanks for watching.